Spoiler alert, Superman is woke. And I'm going to talk about some stuff that happens in the movie. Spoiler alert for that too. Now that I've seen the new Superman movie 3 times, as of the making of this video, I'm definitely going to see it again before it leaves theaters. I can report that the rumors were true, and the concerns of some of the worst people on the internet and their favorite podcasters were well-founded. This Superman is a weak, soft, emotional, anti-American beta male. Or at least that's how those people see it. I just thought he was a nice guy. An actual nice guy, not a nice guy. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? Superman is woke now is a meaningless statement for a couple of reasons. First, the people who make this statement with sincerity have no coherent definition of woke and generally use it to refer to anything they don't like or that makes them uncomfortable. Second, the qualities possessed by this version of Superman, the character and the overall film, which have been pejoratively labeled as woke, are not unique to this movie, so even if you think this Superman is woke, however you define that term, you can't truly say Superman is woke now, because none of the woke stuff is remotely new. What is it about this Superman that offends the anti-woke people so much? I've seen a lot of them rhetorically rolling their eyes on social media about how dedicated this Superman is to preserving life. And that's true. Superman does make efforts to protect people during the movie. We have multiple scenes of him being careful or trying to be when superhero stuff is going on with civilians in the area. Superman, this Superman specifically, and by the way, almost all other versions of Superman from the entire history of the character, almost, cares about saving lives. He goes out of his way to protect the innocent during battles instead of turning a blind eye to focus on the carnage. We even see him taking pains to protect the lives of animals. During an action sequence centered around a kaiju rampaging through Metropolis, we see Superman rescue a dog and a squirrel from certain doom. And we see that he's upset by the disregard some of his fellow superheroes show for the life of the kaiju itself. Even though it's a danger to the city, it's still just an animal doing what it does, and Superman wants to capture it alive and take it someplace where it can't hurt anyone. Or, if necessary, at least kill it in the most humane way possible. While I'm on the subject of animals, one animal, Krypto, damn near steals the movie. And even though this version of Krypto is a very badly behaved dog and Superman is very annoyed by him, Superman takes his responsibility to look after Krypto very seriously and clearly cares about Krypto very much. One of the most criticized scenes in the movie from the anti-woke people is the scene where Superman furiously confronts Lex Luthor after Lex has invaded the Fortress of Solitude and abducted Krypto. Superman wrecks Lex's office, shouts at Lex, makes quite a scene. I saw some folks online who hated this scene because he's this mad about a dog. And if that's your response to this scene, holy shit, are you telling on yourself? Also, did you have the same complaint of John Wick? Or is it only Superman who isn't allowed to be pissed at people who fuck with his pets? So, is saving people's lives woke? Is that bad? Is that something you wouldn't expect Superman to do? Because if so, I don't know, I find that weird. He's Superman. Historically, saving lives is kind of his thing. Is it woke to care about animals and to want to save their lives or at least minimize their suffering? Is it woke to care about your pets? Or to get angry at people who mistreat them? Here's something else about the movie that people don't like. It's pro-Palestine. An important part of the film's plot is a conflict between two fictional countries, Boravia and Jarhanpur. Boravia is a technologically advanced, militarily superior nation that is a longtime ally of the United States. Jarhanpur is weaker, more impoverished, with a troubled history, and is a target of Boravian aggression. Just prior to the events of the film, Superman intervenes to stop the Boravian military from invading Jarhanpur. Later, Superman's superhero friends intervene to stop the Boravian military from invading Jarhanpur again, in a scene where the Boravian military, armed with automatic weapons and body armor and backed up with tanks, are advancing on a crowd of mostly unarmed Jarhanpuran civilians, a crowd which includes children. Superman said, "Free Palestine!" I've seen a lot of people saying that appreciatively online, and I get it. Is the Boravia Jar and Purr story an allegory for the Israel-Palestine conflict? Yes. Or at the very least, it can be reasonably interpreted as such. That's not the only interpretation, but it's an obvious one. There are obvious and strong parallels between Boravia and Jar and Purr and Israel and Palestine. There are also some fairly strong parallels between the two fictional countries and Russia and Ukraine. However, Superman said, Slava Ukraini! The specific real-world situation being referenced by the movie is open to interpretation, but whichever interpretation you take, the literal events of the movie are a strong country is about to invade a vulnerable country for extremely dubious reasons, an invasion that would result in people getting killed, and Superman stepped in to stop that from happening. So if you have a problem with that, what's the problem? We can debate the geopolitical wisdom of Superman doing that. We can question if, in acting as he did, he was doing more harm than good in the long run. We can ask ourselves whether a superpowered individual unilaterally interfering in the affairs of sovereign nations is something that ought to be acceptable. The movie itself raises all those questions, by the way, albeit fairly briefly, but is there anything wrong with having it in the movie? Is there anything inconsistent with how Superman has historically been portrayed, again, mostly, in his decision to intervene to protect the people of Jar and Purr? Does that seem like something Superman wouldn't do? If your problem with the Boravia Jar and Purr stuff is that you read it as pro-Palestinian and you don't like that because you take Israel's side in the conflict, okay. I think you're an asshole, but you're entitled to your opinion. And you're entitled to have a problem with the movie making what you perceive to be a contrary argument. But aren't you guys also the ones who are always attacking liberals and leftists for supposedly being allergic to differing viewpoints? If complaining about the transphobic activism of J.K. Rowling, or the transphobic comedy of Dave Chappelle, or Joe Rogan using his podcast to platform an endless parade of kooks and cranks and conspiracy theorists and the occasional white nationalist makes people on the left fragile little snowflakes for being unable to accept that not everyone shares our worldview, what does whining about a plot in a Superman movie that can be read as pro-Palestine make you? Another thing the anti-woke freaks didn't like about the movie, Superman is an immigrant. I talked about this in a video I made a couple of weeks ago, before I saw the movie, because nearly all of the people who were throwing tantrums about the movie's pro-immigrant content were people who had not seen the movie because it had not yet been released. They heard James Gunn describe Superman as an immigrant in an interview and heard various other members of the cast subsequently back him up and express views supportive of immigrants and immigration, and they said, "Welp, Superman's woke. It's pro-immigrant propaganda." This particular objection has faded significantly since the movie actually opened, because once people got a chance to see the movie, they realized that it's not pro-immigrant propaganda, nor is it propaganda of any other sort, and it would be a reach even for a warped and perpetually aggrieved right-wing shithead to try and paint it that way. Is Superman an immigrant? Yes, that's literally what he is. He came to the place he is now from another place. He's an immigrant. And he's a refugee because he was forced to leave his birthplace due to larger circumstances. Is that what the movie is about? Sort of, but also not really. It's important, but it's not as though immigrants and immigration are good is the only thing the movie has to say. It does say that, or at least I think it's fair to read the movie as saying that, but the Superman is an immigrant bit of the movie is much more concerned with delivering a broader message about tolerance and acceptance and arguing that we should judge people by their actions rather than by where they come from or what their heritage is. And, like, if you're some anti-immigrant right-winger, shouldn't you like the story they tell with Superman here? A big part of the story of the movie is the revelation that, unbeknownst to Superman until now, his parents, Jor-El and Lara, sent him to Earth in the hope that not only would he survive the destruction of Krypton, but that he would rule over the planet and reshape human civilization in the image of Krypton. But Superman rejects that. He's devastated to learn that his Kryptonian parents intended this for him, but he realizes that their values are not compatible with his own, which he learned from his human, extremely American parents, and he chooses to continue living as who he has always been rather than as what Jor-El and Lara wanted him to be. So he's a model minority, right? He's assimilated into his new culture. He's become one of us. Isn't that what you xenophobic pieces of shit are always saying you want immigrants to do? So what's the problem? Do you feel called out by the reveal that Superman's birth parents are authoritarians obsessed with cultural purity and genetic legacy? Did you see those values portrayed in a negative light and get your feelings hurt? Or is it even simpler than that? Is it that you object to a story where the immigrant is the hero and the guy who leads a campaign to demonize the immigrant is unambiguously the villain because you want to think of yourselves as Superman, but the movie is telling you that you're actually Lex Luthor? If that's it, that's not a Superman problem. That's a you problem. Speaking of Lex, let's talk about his portrayal in the movie and why some of the anti-woke crowd might have a problem with him. This Lex is bitter, resentful, abusive, envious, deeply insecure, petty, thin-skinned, vengeful, reckless, short-sighted, egotistical. He's willing to threaten the entire world for his own ego-driven purposes. And when people point this out to him, he shrugs it off because he assumes that whatever happens, he'll be okay, and he doesn't give a shit about what happens to other people. Does all that hit a little too close to home for you Trump voters? Or you Elon stans? You see Lex Luthor on the big screen trying to frame his jealousy as a noble and heroic quality, triggering his own downfall through his arrogance, his callous disregard for life, and oh yeah, let's not forget his unrepentant misogyny. You see all that? And it looks like you're staring at yourself in the mirror and you don't like that? Is that the issue? I can certainly understand that. Here's something else Lex has in common with you and your heroes. He projects endlessly. He projects his own bigotry and fear and ignorance, and most of all, his feelings of inferiority onto everyone else. At one point, Lex rages at Superman, "You show us how weak we really are." Lex, in his narcissism, thinks he's speaking for all people there, but he's really only speaking for himself. That's his reaction to Superman. He feels weak because he is. It's analogous to how many right-wingers, Trump supporters, etc. react to things they perceive as woke, things that call out prejudice and intolerance, things that ask us to try and be our better selves. They, the anti-woke people, react to calls for tolerance and inclusion or to the mere depiction of diversity as though they are being insulted or attacked, when that's not the case. It's just their own insecurity and cowardice coming out. Before the movie came out, some on the right complained that people don't go to the movies to be lectured. They assumed the movie would be a lecture because they heard it had pro-immigrant content, and in their minds, you can't possibly tell a story with pro-immigrant themes, or any political themes at all, without it being heavy-handed and didactic, because they don't know how to do it any other way themselves. More projection. Then the movie opened to massive box office grosses and overwhelmingly positive word of mouth, and most of us found that it was nothing like what the Fox News commentators and culture warriors and fandom menace grifters predicted it would be. It's not pushy or lecturing or preachy. It's not overtly political at all. Its message is one that promotes kindness and honesty and compassion and humanity and respect for others, none of which should have been unexpected and none of which is remotely new to the character of Superman. In addition to those who have sought to dismiss the film on the grounds of its political and social messaging or for how supposedly weak and soft its depiction of Superman is, there are also some who have rejected it because it's allegedly not faithful to the comic books. Firstly, who gives a shit? There have been many excellent adaptations that have diverged from the source material. You're watching the movie, not reading the book. The movie is the movie, and the book is the book. Judge each on its own merits. Secondly, any so-called purist who has a problem with this Superman movie on that basis needs to go back to their local comic shop and catch up on some back issues, because this one is as comic book as any Superman movie has ever been. If you think not, you are confusing the particular Superman comics you have read and liked, if there are any, with all Superman comics. Like what you like, but don't treat your preferences like standards, because they're not. And if you think this Superman is a travesty because of his politics, and you think Superman was never political like that in the comics, when you go to that comic shop, be sure to hunt down some reprints of the earliest issues of Action Comics. The ones where Superman is fucking up crooked mine owners, and war profiteers, and slumlords, and abusive prison wardens. Read some of those stories, among the first Superman stories ever published. Then tell me the new movie is too much of a departure from what the character is, quote-unquote, meant to be. There's a moment very late in the film where Superman is speaking with one of his robots in the Fortress of Solitude. The robot is Number 4, and has been addressed as such throughout the movie. But as he's talking to Superman, the robot indicates that he's not happy being called Number 4. He suggests that he'd rather have a name. He wants to be called Gary. So, a minute or so later, the next time Superman addresses the robot by name, he calls him Gary. In fact, it's Superman's last line of the film. It's also no big deal, and it shouldn't be. Calling someone by their name, the name they want to be called by, shouldn't be a big deal. It's basic respect. It feels like a big deal because we've allowed so much of our culture and our politics to be hijacked by people who are telling us that we should be doing the opposite. Is it woke to make an effort to be kind to people? To respect people's wish to be called by their right name? To care about people? Is it woke to use one's power and influence to try and prevent the slaughter of innocent or vastly outmatched people? Does the fact that he smiles and cries and gets frustrated and gets angry and generally shows his emotions make this Superman weak? Or have you come to value stoicism too much? Does the fact that he strives to be kind and compassionate make him soft? Or have you been convinced to regard cruelty as a virtue? The problem isn't that Superman is woke. The problem is that we live in a world where that fact is even worth mentioning.